So I will be talking to you about the story of one of the landmark cases that I have the honor of joining, which is the resident marine mammals and dolphins of a protected seascape case in the Philippines. Just a background of what happened in this case. I'll provide you context. So the case was filed to protect the Tanyan Strait Protected Seascape, which is the country's biggest marine protected area with over 518,000 hectares, 25 times larger than the famous Tubataha Reefs Natural Park. And strait is also very important as this is located in central Philippines and considered as one of the country's major fishing grounds. It supports about 2.1 million people in 3 provinces. And reef fish abundance in this area, as it supports about 43,000 artisanal fisher folks, is quite high, over 500 species of fish. This is considered as an important migration corridor also of marine mammals and dolphins and other cetaceans. 14 out of the 27 species that are found in the Philippines are actually migrating and also living in this area. So it is home to spinner dolphins, sperm whales, and other types of critically endangered marine mammals. The area is also very rich when it comes to coastal ecosystems. It has about 18,000 hectares of coral reefs, varied species of stony and non-stony corals. It has about 26 out of the 42 mangrove species and 7 out of the 16 species of seagrass found in the Philippines. In terms of the history, this was declared as a protected seascape in 1998. And shortly after that, the Philippine government entered into a service contract with Japan Exploration Corporation, Petroleum Exploration Corporation Limited, JAPEX, and allowed the conduct of oil exploration for oil and natural gas in the strait. So through Service Contract 46, seismic service began in 2005. However, despite this, we learned that the environmental compliance certificate was only issued in 2007, and it was issued based only on an initial environmental examination as required by the Department of Environment at the time. So they also provided for an environmental compliance certificate for the drilling of one exploration well in 2007. So JAPEX began to drill an exploratory well on November 2007 until February 28. Hence, a group of petitioners joined by, several artisanal fisher folks filed 2 separate independent petitions in December 2007 to put a stop to the irregularities of the oil and natural gas exploration conducted by JAPEX in the protected seascape. So what happened was that, there were 2 cases as a legal strategy filed. First, a case was filed in behalf of the resident marine mammals of the Tanyan Strait Protected Seascape, represented by their legal guardians. And then another case was filed by this Fisher Folk Development Center against, both cases were filed against the then Secretary of the Department of Energy, which allowed and approved the service contract, as well as the Environmental Department directors who approved the environmental compliance certificate. So this case was filed in 2007, and this was finally decided in April 21, 2015. So the allegations of the petitioners here were, of course, the injury caused by the seismic surveys, as well as the exclusion of artisanal fisher folks in the oil exploratory wells in the marine waters of the Tanyan Strait Protected Seascape. So the effects of, for instance, injury caused to the resident marine mammals by the sonar surveys, and as well as the loss or the minimization or the drastic decrease in fish catch by the artisanal fisher folks. And so in 2015, the Supreme Court ruled in our favor and declared the oil exploration in Tanyan Strait as unconstitutional because of many reasons. So one of the first things that were actually addressed in this case was actually the legal standing of the resident marine mammals and dolphins, which was quite a landmark issue because of this is actually the first time where a case was brought by non-human plaintiffs, and petitioners tried to test the prevailing concept of standing to sue in Philippine courts. And in consonance with this, before the case was decided, in 2010, the rules of procedure for environmental cases was also issued and promulgated by the Supreme Court, which allowed a liberalized standing to sue. So they introduced the citizen supervision was introduced that permits any Filipino citizen to file an action before our courts for violation of our environmental laws. So because of this, the court ruled in the decision for the Tanyan Strait, the resident marine mammals case, that these rules enable actually the litigants to enforce their environmental rights as citizen suits, and that the provision in the rules liberalizes standing for all cases and collapses the traditional rule on personal and direct interest on the principle that humans are stewards of nature. So in effect, the main legal issue raised by the government against the litigants, the petitioners, were actually the fact that the humans cannot stand in representation of the non-human plaintiffs in this case. However, the court denied their position and said that the humans who acted as the stewards of the resident marine mammals and dolphins were allowed to file this case and had the standing to enforce environmental laws and protect the rights of the non-human plaintiffs against the destructive oil exploration activities. At the same time, they also allowed the standing of course, the human plaintiffs, the artisanal fisher folks in the other case, because the case was actually consolidated. The two cases were consolidated by the Supreme Court. So in this case, this became a landmark decision because then it liberalized the standing to sue, and it collapsed the traditional rule on personal and direct interest in environmental cases. However, the story doesn't stop there for Tanyan Strait. It is still an evolving success story. We noted that even despite the victory that we had in 2015, there were still so many management issues in the strait, such as the degradation of critical habitats, the overexploitation of fishery resources, poor management of foreshore areas, and the weak enforcement of law. So all these issues were still in place despite the pull out of the oil exploration activities conducted by CHAPEX. So we had to, as advocates, continue to support and to continue to address all these management issues. We use as a framework environmental rule of law, which states that that we need to implement and enforce environmental laws to its fullest extent. And for protected areas in the Philippines, there is a current policy framework, legal and policy framework under the expanded National Integrated Protected Area System. And this framework provides for a protected area management board that sets the policies for the general protection and administration of the protected area. There has to be a management plan that has to be enforced so that there would be, to address the significant reduction of biodiversity loss, adaptation to the impacts of climate change, and reduce disaster risks. There has to be a requirement of environmental impact assessment, especially for protected areas. These are considered as environmentally critical areas. So some of these provisions under the current policy, legal and policy framework has to be looked into so that we can have a prevailing environmental rule of law in the area. And so as a result of this, together with civil society organizations and many other groups, the general management plan for Tanyan Strait was crafted in 2015, and this will be for until 2025, with a vision that the protected seascape will be effectively managed by all stakeholders so that we can protect its ecology, ensure its resilience, and sustain socioeconomic development so that communities will be living in harmony with nature. So this was the guiding document for the management, became the guiding document for the management of Tanyan Strait protected seascape. And this already triggered some of the programs, management programs that were identified as priority programs in the area, such as habitat and resource management, research, sustainable financing, and the like. But one focus that we also had, since the problem was really the law enforcement program, we focused on operationalizing an enforcement plan with the assistance of several groups in working actively, such as Oceana, RARE, and other civil society organizations working in the area. So we also noted that there should be an active and functional management body that will regularly meet, and that would be inclusive. Will have diversity and inclusion in its policy making process. However, despite all the work, we note that there are continuing and emerging challenges such as climate change. Communities are highly affected by the unpredictability and severity of weather, and such as typhoons, heat, monsoons. And so we need to ensure the resilience of local communities. Aside from unsustainable fishing practices, marine pollution such as plastics are also emerging concerns with the recent study of the high incidence or presence of microplastics in the waters of Tanyan Strait. So these are continuing challenges that effective management body, the effective management through the PAMBI, Protected Area Management Board, should continually and deal with and address. So, and in short, we need to ensure continuously that protected areas, which are set aside by reason of their unique physical and biodiversity, should be protected to ensure the presence, perpetual existence of these native plants and animals in this area are there for the not only for the benefit of the present, but for future generations. The main takeaway from the work that we have in this area, we need to strengthen the implementation of environmental law, because this is an essential tool to mitigate anthropogenic exploitation and other impacts in protected areas. So thank you so much for listening.